All right, class, I'm back. So with as little a web as this, I will ensnare as great a fly as Cassio. So the scene continues. We've already seen Iago's misogynistic behaviors, actions, thoughts, declarations through his omniscience, right? We see here how he is going to manipulate. If such tricks as these strip you out of your lieutenantry, and it had better you had not kissed your 3 fingers so oft, which now again you are most apt to play the sir in. Very good, well kissed, and excellent courtesy. 'Tis so indeed. Yet again your fingers to your lips, would they were clyster pipes for your sake, right? And you can read the translation of that. It's very, very indicative of Iago's anger towards Cassio and hatred. And we see that his negativity is manifest here as he's watching him act emotionally. And then he says that he wishes his fingers were clyster pipes. I mean, that's pretty indicative of his feelings of anger towards Cassio. And again, we see here his intent and his deceitfulness is shared with us through the omniscience. So Othello arrives, right? We see how Desdemona treats him with respect. He treats Desdemona with respect. And what does he say here? He says at this moment, right? If I were now to die after he sees her, he's reunited with her, right? If I were to die now, 'twere now to be most happy, for I fear my soul hath her content so absolute that not another comfort like to this succeeds in unknown fate. This quote and the quote in the very beginning when he's at the tribunal and he says, my life upon her faith. Remember, her father says, look to her more if thou hast eyes to see. She did deceive her father and may thee. Right? He says that to Othello, and Othello says, my life upon her faith. So number one, he bets it. He says, I bet my life she'd never lie to me. I don't know how logical that is. Is that not hubris or a sense of arrogance, thinking that you can predict the future, that someone will never, ever lie to you? This quote, if I were now to die, right? 'Twere now to be most happy. Now, you know when people say, I'm so happy I could die? Where's the logic in that? So you think you'll never be happier than at this moment? Again, it's a weird statement, and in some ways it's kind of illogical, right? For I fear my soul hath her content so absolute that not another comfort like to this succeeds in unknown fate. I love her so much, and everything, I'll probably never be this happy again. So if I were to die right now, everything would be okay, right? Such a weird thing to say. And a lot of times we perpetuate these expressions without really thinking about what they mean. But nevertheless, we see how perhaps his emotions, perhaps this is foreshadowing that his emotions and his relationship with her is so important to him. Is it bordering on codependence, right? In psychological criticism, codependence is an unhealthy thing. And I think we could see perhaps, right? Macbeth was codependent on Lady Macbeth. Othello is codependent on Desdemona. Perhaps Claudius was codependent on Gertrude. So if for some reason you feel as though you want to analyze codependence as a possible theme from a psychological perspective, the characters from Shakespeare are definitely ripe for such an analysis. So as the scene continues, right? Iago, through his omniscience, right? Oh, you are well tuned now, but I'll set down the pegs that make this music as honest as I am. Essentially, what is he saying here? This analogy that he's going to play Othello, right? Because of his happiness, because he shows his emotions, just like Rodrigo. So, I'm sorry, just like, well, yes, Rodrigo shows his emotions and Iago's able to manipulate him, and so does Cassio. So notice how the 3 men in the play that Iago is focusing his manipulation on, he's kind of zeroing in on their, what he feels are illogical shows of emotion, or right, the heart on their sleeve, right, so that he can take advantage of them. And notice how he says, as honest as I am. Whenever he says this, it's both true and ironic. It's true because he is honest with us and himself in the moments of omniscience. It's ironic because he lies to everybody else. So, Othello and Desdemona leave, right? And Iago, right, is talking to Roderigo, right? And he's trying to tell Roderigo that he feels that Desdemona is going to get tired of Othello, and she's going to want a Venetian man to satisfy her, and she is going to look to Cassio, right? And right, Rodrigo says it's impossible because Iago's going to use Cassio as part of the plan, so he has to help to get help from Rodrigo to further the plan. So he's involving him in the manipulation. And notice again, his feelings towards women and relationships here are extremely misogynistic, illogical, and negative, right? So he basically says, through these questions, she's eventually going to get tired of Othello, and she's going to need a younger Italian man. When the blood is made dull with the act of sport, there should be a game to inflame it and to give a satiety, a fresh appetite, loveliness in favors, sympathy in years, manners, and beauties. And these are all discrimination, right? She's going to stop loving him because he's old. She's going to stop loving him because he's African. She's going to stop loving him because of these cultural ideas, right? All of which the Moor is defective in. Notice how his reasoning is fallacious, but he's able to manipulate Roderigo with this fallacious reasoning, just like Lady Macbeth was able to do the same with Macbeth. And as he does with Othello and Cassio in the future as well. He is duplicity, right? Personified. He is Schadenfreude, which we'll get to shortly here, personified. He takes pleasure in the misfortune of others. So as we continue, so he says, right, Cassio is handsome, young, and hath all those requisites in him that folly and green minds look after. He's got all the good qualities that's going to allow her to justify cheating to herself in some ways. And Rodrigo says, no, I can't believe Desdemona. She's very moral. She wouldn't cheat on him. She's full of a most blessed condition, right? And what does Iago say? The wine she drinks is made of grapes. If she had been blessed, she would have never loved the more. Ooh, again, fallacious reasoning. So Rodrigo is looking at things logically, saying this can't be true. So Iago needs to continue his manipulation by using fallacies because there is no logic to support it, much like Lady Macbeth did. So he starts then with this idea of lust and this idea that he's going to exploit that lust between her and Cassio and that he's going to need Roderigo's help, right? Roderigo agrees with him, right? And he says, we can get Cassio to fight you because just as he wears his emotions on his sleeve, at times he'll be very rash. Now, remember, Iago is going to manipulate the situation and give Cassio alcohol, which will fuel his rash behavior and allow him to be provoked more so. So again, notice how he's laying the plan out, right, through manipulation to Rodrigo to get Rodrigo to buy in. And he says, I'll do it, right, if you can bring it to any opportunity. How's this going to help with Desdemona? And Iago says, well, when we get him out of the picture, right, then you can, right, I'll work on, your desire to woo her. So again, it's very brilliant in that he's able to deceive Roderigo and get him on board with his plan. But we see the brilliance lies in fallacious appeals. But again, people that are good at manipulation, right, are skilled at using the fallacies to cover up logic, to cover up the logistical facts of the situation. Because again, when one doesn't have logical reasons, one has to resort to the fallacies for persuasive technique. And Iago, like Lady Macbeth, is very good at it. Now notice, in the moment of omniscience, right, he kind of confesses to us. He really thinks Cassio loves her, right? The more, howbeit that I endure him not, is of a constant, loving, noble nature, and I dare think he'll prove to Desdemona a most dear husband. So he admits that Othello's a good guy and that Othello would be a good husband to her. Now I do love her too. Wait a minute, what? Not out of absolute lust, though peradventure I stand accounted for his greatest sin. So he says, so Cassio, I think, is in love with her. Othello's in love with her. Obviously, he's married to her. And he says, and I kind of love her too. And he says, but partly led to die at my revenge, right? He's saying I love her because not only I'm attracted to her because of lust, but also because, right, I want to get back at Othello because he feels that Othello has slept with his wife, right? Partly led to die at my revenge, for that I do suspect the lusty Moor hath leapt into my seat, the thought whereof doth like a poisonous mineral gnaw my inwards, and nothing can or shall content my soul till I am even with him wife for wife, or failing so yet that I put the Moor at least into a jealousy so strong that judgment cannot cure. So he essentially suspects that Othello has slept with his wife. Now, he brings up the idea of jealousy. And a lot of times people think of jealousy as you want what someone else has. That's envy. And if you Google jealousy versus envy, right? Envy is often referred to covetous feelings towards another person, right? Many people use jealous to mean the same thing. Jealousy means unpleasant suspicion. So envy is when you want what someone else has, and jealousy is when you're afraid that someone is going to take away what you have already. So be aware of the differences between jealousy, right? Being jealous, feeling resentment against someone because of that rivalry, right? Because you're suspicious and you fear them, as opposed to envy is when you covet what someone else has. Now, think about this in terms of the play, right? The example that I always would use when teaching in class is if your neighbor gets a new sports car and you look over and you say, ooh, I want that sports car, that's envy. If your neighbor says, hey, let me take your significant other for a spin around the block, and you see your neighbor and your significant other driving around and you say, oh my gosh, I think my significant other is going to fall in love with the neighbor and he's going to steal that person from me. Well, now it's jealousy. Jealousy is an irrational emotion. You're afraid that someone's going to take from you what you already have. Envy is when you want what someone else has. Okay, so Iago is jealous that Othello has slept with his wife, right? So because he has that jealousy in him, he's able to bring it out in Othello, and he's going to make Othello jealous of the possibility that Cassio and Desdemona are together. Notice this little note here where he feels till I'm even with him, wife for wife, or failing so. So for him, it would be okay if he just got to sleep with Desdemona. They would be even. But since that's not going to happen, he's going to put him into a jealousy so strong that judgment logic cannot cure. We see this as example of his Schadenfreude, right? So as we finish up this soliloquy, right? If this poor trash of Venice, meaning Cassio, whom I trace for his quick hunting, stand the putting on, I'll have our Michael Cassio on the hip, right? Again, it's very interesting how he refers to Cassio and Othello and Rodrigo, right? And specifically, he's calling Rodrigo the poor trash of Venice, right? And he says, I'll set him up with Michael Cassio, abuse him to the more in the right garb. And what does he say here? For I fear Cassio with my night cake too. He's jealous that Cassio slept with his wife as well. So he thinks everybody's sleeping with his wife. He is jealousy personified. That is why he's able so good. He has the jealousy in himself. That's why he's able to bring it out in Othello. Make the Lord thank me, love me, and reward me for making him egregiously an ass and practicing upon his peace and quiet even to madness. So what he's saying is, I'm going to get Othello to trust me, and even as I'm manipulating him and making an ass out of him, he's going to thank me for it. True duplicity. Tis here, but yet confused. Knavery's plain face is never seen till used, right? And essentially, what is he saying? I've got the plan, but right, I'm going to have to enact it. And essentially, I'm going to need to use, right, Rodrigo to help manipulate Cassio and Othello to make the web that shall ensnare them all. So he essentially wants to ruin Cassio, Desdemona, Othello, and in some ways Rodrigo's lives, and he's getting pleasure out of it because Rodrigo is giving him all his money to woo Desdemona, which we already know that's not an option. Uh, so we see the manipulation here. And through the omniscience and the soliloquies, I think that Iago's character is definitely ripe for a psychological analysis. If you wanted to look at jealousy as a form of paranoia in the play, psychological analysis. If you want to look at Iago's psychosis, Iago's duplicity, Iago's schadenfreude, he is a psychopath, he is a liar, and there's definitely a lot of possible opportunities for psychological criticism, not just with Iago, but with the majority of the Shakespearean characters we've encountered this semester. So thanks for listening. I know Act 2, Scene 1 is a long one, but there's a lot going on, and I hope this helps with your understanding of critical thinking concepts and strategies, and not only how it relates to what we learn about the human experience in the play, but also as a possible source for your fictional analysis in Essay 4 as a psychological criticism, as a cultural criticism, as a gender criticism, as a feminist criticism. This play definitely has lots of opportunities for analysis from a literary criticism and theory perspective. So let me know if you have any questions. Thanks again for watching and listening. Until next time.